When I graduated from seminary a decade ago, my first call was to a Presbyterian church in an inner city neighborhood in Toronto. The church itself was built in 1888. It had been there for the Presbyterian industrialists who owned all of the factories in the neighborhood beside it. But the character of the neighborhood had changed. It had changed significantly over the years, and my neighbors in the neighborhood where I lived were folks in rooming houses, folks who were close to the street, folks that we as a society had pushed to the margins. But the neighborhood was changing. It was changing all around. The unfortunate thing is that the church was not changing with it. And so a church that had once held 800 people without breaking a sweat was now left with 30 or 40 people. It was a church that talked, as we often do, about the 400-person Sunday school. It was a church that had this mythology about how wonderful those times had been. And it was a church that cringed when I asked the question, where are they now? It was a church, like many of our churches, that had a leaky roof. And it was my job in that place to bring in the young people because they're the ones with the money. Now, I myself am now part of that target market of who they were trying to get. I don't have a lot of money. I have a kid at home. We have a family who's trying to make it in Vancouver. And just the same way, we were trying to figure that out there. Why were we doing church in the first place? As you looked around the sanctuary, you could see these islands of people, these clusters gathered and separated with vast spaces between them. We were no community. And when it came to passing the peace, you had to extend an extra effort to go to the other side of the building to find anyone that you could talk to and extend the peace of Christ. The secret to the revival of that church, of course, was to bring in young people. But that still has not happened. A year later, I moved to Ottawa for a number of reasons. But as I was preparing to move, my friend Jared called me up. He said, "I hear you're moving to Ottawa. I have a church there. Could you go and tie the tourniquet? It is bleeding out." The thing is, it wasn't an old church at all. In fact, it was a 7-year-old church plant who had peaked at 150 or 200 people and now was down to 30 or 40 yet again. The church that I had been at in Toronto was so obsessed with youth and what the youth would bring, and here I was stepping into ministry in a church full of young people that was suffering the same problems. It didn't know where it was going. It didn't know what it was doing. And guess what? There was a problem with the roof. And now, 2 years ago, I started working at Christ Church Cathedral here in Vancouver. Now, how a Wycliffe College graduate came to work for that bastion of conservatism called Christ Church Cathedral, Vancouver, I do not know. But I have been welcomed there as an assistant for Christian formation and evangelism, which is probably where I should be. And so 18 months ago, with the Reverend Marnie Peterson, we started a new congregation at Christ Church. It's called St. Bridget's. It's a beautiful community of 25, 30 people. And we're all struggling to figure out, why church? Why are we part of this crazy thing? Why are we doing it in a church that has no roof? This seems to be a theme of ministry, but it's probably more than that. It's probably a theme of a church that is coming to figure out what it is and who it is in this time and place, with the architecture of Christendom crumbling around it. I have no problem with buildings and fixing roofs, but I really need to get to the core of why we're doing this in the first place. When I was serving in Ottawa, we had a budget meeting. As you do. We had a budget meeting where we talked about the importance of the ministry of this place. And somebody got up and made an impassioned plea. And they said, we need to raise the money so that we can keep the lights on. And I just threw up my hands. Because while keeping up the lights on might be important, it is not important to me if it does not mean that we are doing the ministry of the church out in the world. I've come to understand differently than I used to. And it's these three experiences woven together that gives me a bit of an insight into what it means to be the church. And I'm struggling. I'm struggling because there are so many times that I find that we don't even ask the question why. We don't start there. We start with, how are we going to get more people here? How are we going to get more young people here? How are we going to get more money? But we don't start with the question of why we do this in the first place and who it is that invited us into this journey. For the past 5 years, I have tried to run from the church. I do not want to be a part of the church. And yet, for some reason, Christ keeps calling me back. I keep on encountering Jesus in the faces of the most unlikely people who call me back and who extend their arms. And so now I'm part of this community of St. Bridget's within the broader Christ Church community. And week in and week out, we gather and we meet at the table. And I look around the room, and I know that these are people who would not be my friends in real life. I know that these are people who I do not agree with on so many things. And yet I also know that we need each other more than we need to agree. And what I've come to see in this community, what has become so valuable to me in it, is that it is a place where we can wear our brokenness on our sleeves. I grew up in a church that was all about pretense and showing up on Sunday looking as though I had everything together. And that all fell apart really quickly. But now I know that I am a part of a community where I am loved with all of my brokenness, with all of who I am, that I am beloved of God and I am beloved of these people. But the thing that I struggle with, the most is right at the table. As we gather in a circle and as somebody hands me the bread, and it is the most annoying person in the world, the person with whom I have a great conflict. My struggle is when they hand me the bread and they say, "This is the body of Christ broken for you." And I struggle to believe it. But I know that I am broken. I know that we are broken. I know that together we are broken, and yet in this place we are finding healing. And I'm encouraged by the stories of those people who have come to become a part of this congregation. Just at the end of last year, back in November, a young man joined us. He moved to Vancouver from China a couple of years ago to study. And he spent a lot of time looking for a church. For some reason, inexplicably, he had felt the call of Jesus. and he was looking for a church to call his home. And eventually he found us. And so I asked him, this week I asked him, I said, what brought you here? And why do you stay? And so he sent me this email. And this is where I get to pull out the props, right? This is where I get to actually read what he wrote, because I haven't got it memorized. But here's what he said. I was thinking about the question, what makes me coming back to St. Bridget's? And then my phone shuffled to the song Home by Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. It was singing home, let me come home. Home is wherever I'm with you. St. Bridget's is like home to me. But why do I feel that way? You shouldn't forget that I'm only 21, I'm young, and I'm on a journey exploring this world, even as I left my own world back home in China. I'm not a person who likes to settle down. That's simply not me. So why do I come back to St. Bridget's every Sunday? I remember one of my favorite Chinese poems. I'll try to best express it in English. I have been to many beautiful places, in south, in north, in west, in east. So beautiful that I don't want to leave, but no matter how far I go, home is the place I come back again and again. I feel safe and loved in St. Bridget's as I feel in home. I feel safe to be who I am. I feel safe to share my feelings. I feel safe to speak my bad English. I feel safe to tell people I love God and that I love other men. There are no more lies and masks because I know no one will judge me, no matter what. I am loved as I am, in God's mercy and witness. It is this love that can pick up a broken heart and light up the little warmth in it. I feel that we are one. Each of us are so different in color, gender, culture, language, sexuality, and yet we are one. We are one with no divide, safe, loved, and the feeling of being one. This is what home feels like to me. This is what St. Bridget's feels like to me. This is what God feels like to me.